Here's Kevin Ryan, right here. So I just woke up a little bit early in the morning. It's December 1st here in Tokyo, November 30th in Colorado. And we're here with Tom Ryan Remembers episode. Gosh, I think it's this 48, episode 48. And we're continuing with the series about Maryland. And this one is about Maryland, the later years. And we're going to pick up with Ginger. She went to school. Where did she go to school?
Well, she didn't go to Kings Road School where all you kids were enrolled. As I said earlier, everybody would pour out of their houses at school time starting in the morning, and the street would be full of kids walking the 3 blocks over to, after all, we called it the baby boomer town, and everybody had lots of kids. So this little school wasn't big enough for any more, and they didn't have a kindergarten there. So Ginger had to go on a school bus to a school that had a kindergarten, and when she went, she was just thrilled. It was, she was 5 years old, and we could just see her head bouncing above the window when we waved goodbye to her. And she liked riding the bus so much that when she got to school, came home from school, she stayed on the bus when she went past her stop. And when they got to the end of the route, she was the only one on the bus. The bus driver says, "Why didn't you get out?" And she says, "I don't know. I just was enjoying the ride." So he had to drive the big school bus back to our house and let her off. So now we had 4 kids, not 3. We had grandma coming to stay with us. So we needed to move to Elgin. And we bought a beautiful home at 29
Southwestern.
Weston Avenue. And that was the nicest house we ever lived in. And we stayed in that longer than any house we ever lived in. So it was, and grandma had her own room, and you boys went down into the basement and built a special room. You had bunk beds hanging from the rafters. And I know everybody had their own room, and we had plenty of bedrooms, and the house was much bigger. So we really enjoyed that very much, being in Elgin.
Yeah.
Well, then you kids were all in school. Everybody was in a school, only a couple of blocks from the home, and
Yeah, it was only half a block.
half a block away.
Yeah.
So Marilyn decided she could go back to work now, but who was going to take care of the house? And it wouldn't be fair to put this on grandma. Anyway, grandma would go off on trips to California and to New Jersey, and tried to do some other things. So she wasn't always there. So Ginger agreed to take care of the house, wash the dishes, set the table, and
So this
do
is,
some light housekeeping.
sorry, this is no longer, she's not a kindergartner anymore. She had grown up, I
No,
bet,
she's
right?
grown up. She went through the school and junior high and
At
now lives in.
Gifford and Abbott and
Yeah.
yeah. So then she was what, in high school, right? Because then
Right.
that's when I had started leaving.
Right. So
Right.
finally, Marilyn had taken care of your kids, got you, Grace. And so Ginger, most of you kids had jobs after school and to make money. And Ginger, instead of getting a job, the deal was that she would take care of the house and do some light housekeeping and get the dinner ready. And so Marilyn could be a nurse and didn't have to worry about that. And so she paid Ginger out of her nurse wages. So now we had a 2-income family. And from now on, life was, we had plenty of money and we could do a lot of things. we went camping, for example. Of course, that's a cheap way to travel, but we'd go for a whole month. We'd go camping, and Marilyn liked that. She was a good sport. She did most of the work. She had to cook and everything, and of course, when you're cooking on a camping, it's a lot harder without all the appliances to help you. And she was just good natured about the whole thing. So because, and you kids, of course, love camping. Your only question was when we were going toward a campground, does it have a swimming pool or does it have swimming?
Yeah.
And it was important. So we had a
So
lot of fun.
so mom, sorry, mom with her nursing would nurse during the day, but then later on she went to evenings and then finally to nights, right?
Right. So she could ask to get whatever hours she wanted. They were short of nurses. They were glad to have her, and she would work in any department. The only department she didn't want to work in was the children's the juvenile department, uh, where kids might have different diseases that she could bring home to you kids. She
Uh-huh.
didn't want to be with kids, but she was with every other department and learned a lot that way, changing departments. And they'd call her, and so she worked steady, but not in any one department. One of the things they didn't have cell phones then, and uh, patients would push a button and a light would come out in the hall in front of their room. And then the nurse see that light and the nurse would come running. There's something wrong, something I need. And they just say, can you get me a glass of water? Okay, then they'd run and get the glass of water, bring it to her, or anything else. So the nurse was kind of a lot of the stuff she did wasn't nursing at all. And it was a lot of running. And Marilyn was getting up there in age now. She's getting late 40s. So she says, I can't, at my age, run up and down the halls like that anymore. I'm going to quit. And she told him she was going to resign and altogether. And I think they wanted her to stay. And they said, do you know that up on the 6th floor, that empty floor we built when we built the new hospital, we had that for growth. And actually, hospital beds were not needed as much now. They had all kinds of ways of avoiding getting people out of the hospital. It was so expensive. So they didn't need the 6th floor for hospital beds, but they made it into an emergency psychiatric ward. It was a first aid, and it was private. It wasn't public. So they had to depend on hospitalization insurance. And most insurances would only pay for a limited number of days. So this is for a crisis. And it was amazing how many of our neighbors, our church members, fellow teachers ended up on her floor in an emergency situation. And then they worked on it. But she said the police were so uncomfortable coming up to her floor, her psych ward on the elevator, usually with someone handcuffed, that they would get to the 6th floor, the doors would open, they'd have their hand on the key and they turned the key and took the handcuffs off and pushed them into the 6th floor, and the doors closed and the policeman disappeared. So now they were Marilyn's problem with no handcuffs to deal with.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes, they all kinds of things. Sometimes it was drugs. And I think that's where Marilyn got her negative feeling about drug addiction, is that all of them, she had many drug addicts come on the floor, and they were not interested in getting off drugs at all. They just wanted to kind of dry out, or whatever they call it with drug addiction, and cool off for a while because they'd gone over the top, and they could get back to their recreational basis for drugs. And they didn't want any counseling or any help. They just wanted to have a nice warm bed and 3 meals a day for free. And when the insurance ran out, the hospital said, you're going to have to leave. And they'd say, well, now it's not winter anymore. It's spring, and we can go on outside and and live on, and they left the hospital. So she didn't see drug addiction as some people didn't use that time for helping themselves and getting off of the drugs. They
Uh-huh.
didn't want to get off the drugs. So anyway, that was one experience she had. But amazing how many people, and people had imaginations. She'd come home and tell stories. Of course, she didn't use names. She was it was very confidential. She didn't tell me about any of these people in our church. I usually found it out from the people themselves would tell, but not from Marilyn. But she'd tell about an anonymous person. And one woman kept complaining that there were bugs in her bed, and they said, oh, yeah, she's hallucinating, she's imagining. And so Marilyn goes down there and like, no, there aren't any bugs in your bed. You get back in and back and forth. And finally, they really pulled the bed apart. And sure enough, they found a spider in their bed. And Marilyn says, never jump to conclusions. Don't, just because they're mental patients, don't assume it's a hallucination.
Uh-huh.
So she learned a lot there. She was the supervisor, and it was night. She liked to work nights because she said that the doctors would come on in the day shifts. Of course, the doctors didn't like to come up to the psych ward. The regular doctors are that their patients would end up on the sixth floor. They'd come up there and give them whatever they had and got out of there as quickly as they could. So she didn't have to deal with them even at night at all. They didn't come unless there was some real big emergency. So she liked the nights better. It was calmer, and she could talk with people. And a lot of the people, of course, didn't sleep well. They'd sleep in the daytime and wander the halls at night. And so she'd sit and talk with them, and she was really good at that. I think it was the best part of her nursing career. She worked there until she was, we both retired together early. And so she was only in her 50s when she retired.
Uh-huh.
But it was a good time. And she would ride over to the hospital, but it's only a few blocks away. That was another advantage to it from our house. And it was a beautiful new hospital. And we enjoyed Weston Avenue very much.
Uh-huh. Okay. So yeah, let's see. Let's switch over to the Church of the Brethren. The
Oh, yeah.
Church of the Brethren.
Right.
And
we went to St. Lawrence Church at first. And the priest, when he knew I was a teacher, asked if I would teach the confirmation class,
uh-huh.
which I tried to do. And I think those kids in the confirmation class had a lot to do with me leaving the church. They weren't interested. They were, see, the kids that went to the parochial school, that was taken care of every day along with their studies. But these were public school kids who had to come on Saturday and come to a class that they didn't really want to come to. And I was going to teach them the foundations of Catholicism so that they could be confirmed. And so that didn't work out very well. I didn't enjoy that experience. I remember saying, I don't think our kids are going to be going to this church much after they're in high school unless we force them to. And so I started looking. Another thing about the Church of the Brethren, they were active in the community. Catholic Church wasn't interested in civil rights or anything social beyond the Catholic religion. And I was. And so the brethren were doing that. I got called that was I be interested in joining a group that wanted to buy a house in a white neighborhood and then rent it out to a black family. And it got around town that the brethren, what they want is a nigger on every block. And that was what their goal was. Well,
oh my God.
they were trying to break up the segregated housing that we had. That was true. Well, I joined that. I donated money, and then we started meeting, and we had marches, and I remember marching with the brethren. And so to me, and here was Marilyn, a convert. Usually converts like Marilyn are much more Catholic than people who are what they call cradle Catholics. And so she went along with the whole thing. She was a really good sport, and we all joined the Church of the Brethren. Even Grandma joined, and there were so 7 up there of us joined the church at one time. We actually joined in Colorado during the year we were out there, but we were soon back in Elgin and in the milieu of the Church of the Brethren. Some people in town, or at least what the mayor, he called the brethren the conscience of the town. We called people to conscience. One of our ministers was the head of the Alcoholics Anonymous Foundation, and another one was the head of the Mental Health Foundation. And these were people, ordained ministers in the Church of the Brethren, but nobody knew that. I mean, they didn't make anything about that they were ministers. They were active in social work of all kinds and helping people and housing and civil rights and the anti-Vietnam War too. So we all decided to join. Another reason was you kids all liked the youth group. The first day, and they had a really neat, the church group was mostly, the youth group was teenagers whose parents had been missionaries. Some of them were born in foreign countries, and their parents were now working at the general offices of the Church of the Brethren that's in Elgin. And the kids were really all kind of college oriented, and
Right.
the
Yes.
kids really found them interesting. And so
Right.
whole family, even Grandma, she liked it too. So we were enthusiastic members of the Church of the Brethren.
Yes. Right. I remember switching over. That was good. We had about a year there before that we didn't go anywhere, and that was nice to sleep in on Sunday mornings. But then Church of the Brethren came along, and youth group
Right.
was more fun.
There was a
Than,
little lag, but not much of a lag between the
yeah.
two churches that we got involved. And then we were every Sunday, we'd go out into the parking lot, and our car would be the only one left in the parking lot on Sunday morning. And why did you stay so long? We liked church. It was wonderful. We talked to people, and you kids did too. Everybody liked it.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
that
So,
was our,
and Don Shank, who was the pastor of the church, with
yeah,
they had 40 ministers because it was the town Elgin was the general headquarters of the Church of the Brethren. They had a big printing press and a lot of general offices. They called it the GO, with a lot of ministers in administrative positions in the church for the worldwide organization.
yes, they didn't want to have a Rome. They were very anti-authority from the top, just the opposite of the Catholic Church that way. So they didn't want a pope, but they had a general secretary, they called him, and he had a board, and they were the missionaries, and with a pension for the pastors, collected the money for the pensions.
But it was
Things like that had to be centrally located.
it
But they
was
tried to avoid
but it was similar to the Presbyterian Church, where a lot of the authority was on the parish level.
yes, right.
And so,
Yes.
yeah. But we had an
But
unusual parish
you-
with 40 different ministers in the congregation.
That's
But
right.
but Don Shank was the pastor at the time, and
Yeah,
Don Snyder was the assistant pastor, and he helped Grandma when she went to Sherman Hospital.
yes. Grandma died at Sherman Hospital. Her doctor was a doctor there. And so she went to Sherman. And Don Shank, the pastor of the Church of the Brethren, he is a good pastor, came around and would come to see the people in his congregation. And he came and talked to her, and and then finally he left, and we read some Bible passages and things that we had been studying at the church. And Grandma then finally just died at that point. And I thought her son, the convert to Catholicism, was there when she died too. And he was really impressed at what a wonderful death Grandma had. She knew she was dying, and it was time, and she accepted it, and she wasn't in any pain, but she just drifted off, and it was a very wonderful. And I thought the brethren had a lot to do with that, and Don Shank especially. He was a veteran of the Marine Corps in World War II, and he belonged to a denomination that was pacifist, but the denomination did not force its rules upon its members. And I guess 8 out of 10 brethren, when they were called to the draft, went and served. They didn't. They weren't conscientious objectors. But a lot of the people in that church in Elgin were conscientious objectors during World War II. Yeah. And they came there, even if they weren't ordained pastors. They came, of course, ordained pastors were exempt from service anyway, but they came here to Elgin to work in the state hospital, and they worked there off their time that they would have been in service in the state hospital, and they didn't get paid very much. They didn't get any GI Bill, and of course they had the stain of all the parents whose boys were over there doing the fighting for them, but they were very kind, and they didn't hate anybody for it. That's just what we believe. And so you knew some of the people my age who were conscientious objectors.
Okay, well, good. I think this is a good place to finish, and we'll have another episode on Marilyn again for after Dumbarton Oaks or from the Dumbarton Oaks period, and then maybe another one for the Colorado period, because you've got quite a few questions going here. So we have a couple more episodes on that. Okay.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
That's enough. Thank you.